Henry and Tom never imagined a click on a computer could change their lives. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video. It was a late evening when the brothers stumbled across an online auction listing a vast parcel of land on the outskirts of town. It was private, quiet, kissed by wilderness, but still near enough to modern convenience. The listing was vague, the price suspiciously low. Too good to be true, Henry joked. But something about it stirred a childhood dream in both of them, a dream of building their own home, away from the noise and rush of the world. They placed the bid, and they won. With keys in hand and curiosity in their hearts, the two set off one brisk autumn morning to see the land for the first time. The gravel road crunched beneath their tires as golden leaves danced across their windshield. They talked about planting fruit trees, about a wraparound porch, maybe even raising chickens. But as they crested a small hill and the land stretched before them, something stood out. Right there in the middle of the property, a shed. That shed wasn't in the listing. It looked like it had been forgotten by time, a sagging roof of rusted metal, its wooden frame choked in weeds and vines. Tom raised an eyebrow. Maybe it comes with a free haunted house. They parked the car and walked closer. The doors were thick and chained shut. Curious and undeterred, Henry found a pipe sticking out of a nearby debris pile and used it to force the chain. With a metallic snap, it gave way. The doors groaned open. Dust and shadow greeted them. Inside, the air was cold and stale, as though it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Old shelves lined the walls, mold creeping across forgotten tools. But in the back, half hidden beneath a tarp, were 3 wooden boxes. Henry pried the first one open. Inside were black and white photographs, handwritten documents, and a blueprint so brittle it nearly crumbled in his hands. The photos were striking. One showed a solemn man with a curled mustache, a woman in a corset beside him, and a little girl clutching a doll. The style suggested the late 1800s. But it was the blueprint that caught their attention. It was a house large, detailed, precise. And in the corner beneath a signature and a strange upside-down triangle were the initials, R.S. It didn't take long before curiosity turned into obsession. They drove to the town library, hoping local archives might offer a clue. They emailed historians. They posted in genealogy forums. For weeks, there was silence until one evening, Tom's phone rang. It was a man named Mr. Turner, an elderly historian who claimed he recognized the signature. They met the next day. Mr. Turner laid out a similar blueprint, almost identical. Except, he said, his finger sliding across the paper, this version doesn't include the shed. His voice lowered. That structure wasn't supposed to be there. The brothers returned to the property with renewed urgency. They combed every corner of the shed until Henry noticed a soft, hollow thud beneath his feet. A few pry bars and splinters later, they uncovered a hidden compartment. Inside, a locked chest, heavy, ancient. When they finally cracked it open, they found something extraordinary: more photos, gold coins, and a leather-bound journal. The name inside, Robert Stevenson. Stevenson's journal read like a window into another time. He wrote about family, ambition, and loss. His writing grew more erratic toward the end, as if he feared being forgotten. One entry stood out. It mentioned a fortune, his legacy, buried beneath a tree near the property's edge, left for his descendants to someday find. Could it be? They followed the clue. Near the far end of the property stood an enormous oak, its roots wide and tangled. They dug beneath it with shaking hands. Hours passed, and then metal, a box. Inside, bundles of old bills, more gold coins, and a letter, yellowed and fragile. To my descendants, it began. Stevenson had predicted that his fortune would be squandered by his children and hidden it in hopes that someone worthy might one day discover it. And that person, by some twist of fate, appeared to be Henry and Tom. But their story didn't end there. Not long after, Henry heard a strange sound in the backyard, like a dull, deliberate knock from beneath the ground. The wind was still, the air silent, but something didn't sit right. He knelt, pressed his ear to the earth. Another thud. Something else was buried here. He called for Tom. The two stood there in silence, listening. Again, that deep muffled knock, like something striking wood beneath layers of soil. "We dig," Henry said, his voice firm, eyes locked on the ground. With spades in bare hands, they clawed at the dirt until their tools struck something solid. Not a root, not a rock, wood. They cleared the soil and revealed a rectangular hatch embedded in the earth. A rusty metal ring sat at the center. Gripping it together, they pulled. With a groan and a snap of rotted hinges, the hatch opened into blackness. A wave of cold air rushed up, smelling of damp earth and something strange. They shone their flashlights down. A ladder disappeared into the shadow. Without a word, Henry descended. The wood creaked under his weight but held. At the bottom, his feet landed on solid ground. The air was thick but breathable. When Tom joined him, they slowly moved forward, the flashlight beams dancing over dirt walls. Then metal. Hanging from a hook was an old oil lantern. It was dusty but intact. Tom grabbed it and Henry struck his lighter. To their surprise, the wick caught. The space lit up in a warm, golden glow. What they saw was breathtaking. They stood in a room carved from earth, lined with shelves of books and boxes. The back wall was covered in faded maps, blueprints, and notes. An old writing desk sat in the corner, its drawers half open. At its center, framed by cobwebs, was a painting of family portrait. Robert Stevenson. The painting was remarkably detailed. Stevenson stood tall, his wife and daughter beside him. The backdrop looked eerily similar to the land they'd just inherited, but something more shocking caught Tom's eye. "Does he look like us?" he whispered. Henry leaned in. The jawline, the eyes, even the slight slant of the brow, it was uncanny. They weren't just connected by name. They were blood. Suddenly, everything made sense. The land, the documents, the signature. Stevenson hadn't hidden this treasure for just anyone. He had hidden it for them. They removed the painting from the wall, hoping for another secret. Behind it was nothing but stone. But then Henry noticed scratches on the frame, subtle, worn. With a knife, he pried open the back. Out tumbled a key and a wax-sealed envelope. Inside the envelope was a letter, dated over a century ago. Stevenson wrote of betrayal by his descendants and his fear that his values would be lost to time. "If you find this," the letter read, "know that you are of my blood. Let your heart guide you." The letter also mentioned one final chamber. Using the key, they unlocked an old cabinet. There was a click, and the side of the cabinet creaked open, revealing a narrow passage. The brothers looked at each other, their breaths shallow, their hands trembling. Inside the passage, they found an ornate chest heavier than the first. They placed it carefully on a table and turned the key. Inside was wealth beyond imagining, gold bars wrapped in cloth, antique coins, and legal documents proving ownership of multiple properties across the region, many of which were still active under shell name. This wasn't just treasure, it was a legacy. They brought everything to Mr. Turner, the historian, who helped validate the documents. Court records confirmed what they feared and hoped Stevenson's lineage had indeed been muddied, misrepresented. And now, finally, it had come full circle. Henry and Tom were his only true descendants. The brothers decided to honor Stevenson. They built a home on the property using the original blueprint, restoring the dream that had been abandoned over a century ago. They added a small museum wing displaying some of Stevenson's writings and artifacts for the town to learn from. What began as a simple online purchase turned into a rediscovery of heritage, history, and identity. The money changed their lives, but the story changed their heart. And every time a visitor stepped into the museum and asked, "Is this story real?" the brothers simply smiled and said, "Come take a look for yourself."